Today we're going to be working on this 2011 Polaris Ranger 800 XP. Finally get it back on four wheels here. If you didn't see the last time I worked on this thing was making some horrible noises when it was in full-wheel drive. We'll try the all-wheel drive. Oh, I told you, horrible noises. So if you didn't catch that last video, I ended up draining the fluid out of the front differential and there was no fluid to be found. So obviously I knew we were in for a treat when I saw no fluid in there. And oh boy, we were. This is the front gear case I pulled out of there and I started tearing it apart. The further I went, the worse it got. This side case is probably one of the only salvageable parts on this. That and the hubs are probably salvageable as well. These are still in decent shape. But if we go ahead and I'll get that pin out of there, pull the pinion cover apart. As you can see, the pinion cover is toast as the bearing got taken out and then it wore into the cover. Pinion gear is pretty well shot. I've definitely seen people put these back together and run them, but it's pretty rough. But that's the least of our worries. So obviously our case is pretty well busted. We get some very bad looking paste in here. You can see where the ring gear was just terrorizing this case and missing lots and lots of pieces to those teeth on this ring gear. So obviously we need some parts. So obviously it wouldn't be worth rebuilding this as there's very few parts to be salvaged. You know, if you went with new parts, by the time you got everything you needed here, the cost would outweigh buying a new OEM gear case, which a new OEM gear case is not cheap. $1,800 or so, I think, if I remember correctly, somewhere around there. Very expensive. The next option I gave the customer was I had a case and some parts. I could have used that, would have sold it to him fairly cheap. We could have used the rebuild kit for it and everything. That would have been probably his cheapest option. And then I also give him an option of buying another gear case. We could have bought a used one for $500-600, I think it was, somewhere around there. But then you're taking a risk on a used one, and who knows, you might need bearings, seals. They are rebuildable. One option would be to go OEM, very expensive, but we could go OEM. The other option, which is what he picked, was to go with a East Lake Axle branded front gear case. And we'll see. Go ahead and get this out of the way. Now I've already gone ahead and opened this up, and here it is. It was packed very well in here in a nice styrofoam casing. So go ahead and pull that out. It looks very much like the OEM gear case. Some of you have been waiting for a video on this because it's been a little while since my teardown, and parts have been on order the next day after I posted that video, or maybe the day I posted that video. Anyways, it was not these guys' fault. East Lake Axle, certainly it was not their fault. I called up East Lake Axle and asked them, you know, how's your guys' warehouse? Because I heard they just had a hurricane down there in Florida, and that's where they're based out of. I think it was around the Tampa area or something. I don't remember. Somewhere in there. And they said, oh yeah, we're doing good. We'll ship out if you want. So I went ahead and ordered. And this came within like 2 to 3 days. I was very impressed with the shipping. Florida to northern Vermont. Very impressed with the shipping. So glad we got it. We're doing wheel bearings on this thing as well. And those, I don't know where they came from, but man, they took a long time to get here. But anyways, they're here now. Let's check over this front diff. All right, so yes, it is almost identical to stock. Now, I know this one's obviously torn apart, but if you take a look, they're very similar. Obviously, they can't be identical because this is not OEM. This is aftermarket. So they're going to make things a little different, but there's very few things that are different. I mean, if you look, the drain plug is in pretty much the same spot. Obviously, the mounting is going to be the same, otherwise it wouldn't work. We don't have the casting numbers here. We got a sticker with a serial number and model number up here. So it's a Diff 302 that goes into this Ranger. And then Polaris got their serial number and model number here as well. So yeah, if you take a look, I mean, everything is very, very similar, if not identical. I don't know. They're not supposed to be identical, but I wouldn't think. Polaris has got a patent for that, so. This front case, a little bit different than this. Maybe that's how they got around everything else, but I have not used these personally. I've read a bunch of good reviews on them. So the price of this thing was 500 to, it was around 500 bucks, maybe to 550, somewhere in there after tax. I think it was like 520 plus tax. So it's a very good price for a brand new gear case here. Hopefully it holds up over time. I would pull this case apart, but you know, it's brand new. I'd rather not, just in case there's issues with it. I don't want to have any issues with warranty, so I'm not going to open it up. But I'm guessing it's set up very, very similar to the OEM one. This thing should work a whole lot better when we get it installed. We're going to get this old thing out of here and get these shavings off my cart. Must add oil before use. Remember that if you install these, obviously they're not going to ship them filled with oil. Go ahead and cut this zip tie off. We'll come down here. I got my brake calipers in there, so we'll get those out of the way. And that one. Now we do have some dirt in there. We don't want that underneath that diff, so I'll blow all that out. Now that we got everything cleaned, we'll make sure, a little easier to see on this side. So this is where the front diff is going to mount up here. So I want to make sure it's nice and cleaned off. These nuts were for this front bumper here. So we'll set those there. We'll grab our front gear case, front differential, whatever you want to call it. Bring her on down here. We'll remove these bolts. Okay, once we get it in there, then we can rotate it to the correct position. Now, once you get it in here, you do have to line your drive shaft up with the shaft. So your whole line's up on this pinion and your drive shaft here. I definitely recommend lifting the rear tires up so you can move this drive shaft, especially if you can't see the pinhole. It'd be hard to put it in the right position. So now we can turn it so we can see that hole. And it'll make it a lot easier to go ahead and line these up. Come on to this side, you'll be able to see a little better, and we can see we're off one notch. So you're gonna pull it back out and then put it in the correct notch. All right, then once you get it in the correct hole, and you can see clear to the other side, if it wasn't in the right position, that shaft would be right in the way. Now Eastlake Axle doesn't seem to give you any instructions for the installation, so we're just going to go off OEM specs. As far as installing it, it's the same as OEM. As far as these bolts, I'm guessing we just go off OEM specs, which is 40 foot-pounds. It tells you to replace with new bolts every time. I've definitely reused these. I just add, see, you can see there's a coating of Loctite on there. I just add new Loctite when I reuse these. So we'll go ahead and install the bolts, torque it down to 40 foot-pounds. So we'll just come under here and we'll go ahead, line those holes up. And that's right, it wasn't the front bumper that I pulled these off for, it was the plow mount. This has a plow mount on it, which kind of restricts you from pulling the front diff. So you gotta remove that. We definitely do not torque it until we get all 4 bolts installed. There. Do a crisscross action here. Beautiful. And we certainly want to make sure fluid drain bolt is torqued to spec. Perfect. Pull off that filler plug. Now, one thing you want to make sure is you're putting the right fluid in that front gear case. Otherwise, it will not operate properly. If you put gear oil in there, any type of gear oil, it's probably not going to work correctly. Now, there is some alternatives, but I use the OEM. This is what I use right here. Polaris Demand Drive Fluid. It's expensive. Yes, it is. But this goes quite a few changes. So yes, this stuff is very expensive. This is a brand new bottle of it. I got an old one here I'm going to be using, but it doesn't take a lot. For the front gear case on that, it takes like 9 ounces, somewhere in there. Depending on, this one's going to be bone dry, so it's going to take all 9.3 ounces or whatever it calls for. This is a quart, 32 ounces, so you will get a little over 3 changes out of this quart right here. So when you think of it that way, it's not too bad. You know, you take the price of whatever you pay for this, it's changing every day. So whatever, say it's 20 bucks a quart, 3 changes, you know, well, you're into it for like $7 per change, which is not horrible if you think of it that way. If you think of it $20, $25 a quart, then kind of gas for air when they tell you that much for a quart anyways. I've seen this stuff all the way up to 30 bucks a quart. So depending on where you buy it from. So between $7 to $10 per change, and then you're good to go. If you're running Polaris, you're going to want to buy this anyways if you're doing it yourself. Now, I've heard of some people using John Deere hydraulic tractor fluid. I personally haven't used it, so I couldn't tell you on that. And then some people use ATF. I have used that in my personal machines before, and it worked out good. But I'm doing this quite a bit now, so I buy quite a bit of this demand drive fluid, so I just use this now. But you can use ATF. Don't take my word for it, but I've used it with good luck in the past. I've used Valvoline, Max Life, ATF, the red bottle, and you can buy that stuff for like 20 bucks. Maybe it's gone up now, $25, $26 a gallon. So it's a big difference in the price. But if you stick with the OEM stuff, you know you're getting the right fluid in there. Now, you don't have to measure out exactly 9 ounces or 9.3 ounces. What you can do is you can start pumping it in there, and when you want to be at the bottom of the threads here. So if you fill it up a little bit too far and it starts dripping out, don't put the plug in. Let all the excess drip out, and then put your plug in. You're good to go. These front gear cases can be very sensitive to as far as the fluid level goes, so make sure you get the right amount in there. You don't want too little, you don't want too much. Now we can see the fluid level right there at the bottom of the threads. Want to rotate that drive shaft, you can see the fluid right there. Then we can put our plug back in, torque her down. So I like to put the fluid in at that point. That way when I'm rotating everything, everything's covered in oil in there. I mean, just a little bit's not going to ruin it, obviously, but you don't want to forget about the oil. But you also don't want to forget about this roll pin. This roll pin goes into that drive shaft, like I was saying, and for some reason you forgot this, that drive shaft could slide back, and while you're driving, say at a high rate of speed or whatever, that drive shaft would be slapping around everywhere in there and break a bunch of stuff. So don't forget the roll pin. And then this roll pin will go into that drive shaft, and we'll just squeeze it into place with a C-clamp. A little tight to get in there, but it's doable. All right, once we get that wound in there, we can go ahead and remove it. And you can see our pin is all the way through. Up here is a vent, and it comes with a plug. You want to leave that plug on there until you get it installed so you don't get any dirt, dust, anything like that in there. Once you pull that, you can go ahead and hook up your air vent hose, and then you got to plug in your power connector, which is the only wire coming off that front diff, and it's going to plug in right up there. Once we get that connected, now we're ready to just throw this front end back together. CV shafts, A-arms, whatever you took out, put it back in the same way. We got a little work to do to this because we got some bad wheel bearings. So I'm going to replace some wheel bearings. And you can see these CV boots are very weathered. A few more miles of rotating and those things are just going to rip right open. Or a few more months of drying out and same thing, they'll rip open. So we're going to replace all 4 of these boots on the CVs, and then we can throw everything back together. All right, we'll start out with the left side. That out of there. Remove the nut. Get our 2 washers out. The CV shaft shall separate very easily. That one, these actually look like brand new shafts, or fairly new shafts. But like I said, the boots have just kind of dry rotted. But our bearing has seen better days. You can see when I do that, quite a bit of movement in there. This should be able to come out of there. You can hear those bearings. Pretty dry, so we'll be replacing them. Go ahead and remove our retaining clip here. Okay, that. And go ahead and press this out. There's the old bearing. So we're just going to clean up the surface a little bit in here because there's going to be a little rust, a little pitting on the outside edge. Take a little sandpaper, clean that up real quick. Throw on in there. Go ahead and get our retaining clip back in there. Just like that. Beautiful. These rotors are very well rusted. We're gonna just sand them off. We're not replacing them right now. So now for these CV shafts, we're just gonna tear them apart. That off there. Yeah, these boots are just in such rough shape. Flip this side over. Same thing, we'll remove these. Just like so. We'll peel that boot back. And then there's a clip in here we gotta remove. This is gonna be a greasy mess, so I'll put on my rubber gloves. There it is. We'll just remove that. Pull that on out of there. Now, this end will pop right off. Wipe this down. Now there's gonna be a clip we need to remove in here. Just like remove it like that. Now this can slide on out of there. Set that right there. We can remove our boot. Throw that one away. Then we can take this side and it goes off the same way as that one. Just like that. So you're left with a shaft that looks like that. We'll clean off all that old grease. Spray it down with some brake cleaner. Wipe off all the excess here. Take our grease and just pack it in there. Take our new boot and slide it on. So the key here is to not get any grease on the outside of that, the sealing surface, otherwise it could slip out, or it has a higher possibility of slipping out. This one comes with the banding style clamps. Feed that on through, all the way up, tighten her down. Bend it over, snap it. Just like that, we're on there. Now we gotta do the inside one. Let's do the same thing to the other side. First, our CV boot goes on. Now this, you actually want to slide it past all that stuff so you can put everything in there and then slide it up. Go ahead and install that. There we go. Go ahead and clean out all that grease. And we'll add the fresh stuff. This can go in there. And then our clip. These are nice and easy to snap in. Just make sure it doesn't pop out. Perfect. And there we go. We got a shaft ready to go with new CV bolts. Looks brand new, other than a little rust. So while we're in here, we're also going to replace these bushings, as you can see. As you can see, I can rock it back and forth. And that is due to those bushings there. And the bolt. And that'll one. Now this can just slide out like that. Go ahead and replace these bushings. There's that. Now we'll just pull this bushing out. Same thing with the other one. There. Now we just need some new parts. As far as on here, we'll install our new plastic bushings. These can be a little bit of a snug fit, so I grease them up and then I just press them in with a C-clamp. Or you could do this on a press or whatever you want. A little grease on our steel bushing. Slide that on in there. Sometimes these are in there a little tight too, so we can go ahead and push that on in. Both new bushings installed. We're going to, this ball joint is a little loose. It has up and down play, so we're going to replace that as well. Alright, that one broke. That's okay. The new ball joint comes with a new one. Pull that rubber boot off. You can see how dry it is in there. That's why we got all kinds of movement. It's been running dry for quite a while. Little shot of AWD. There's the old ball joint. Slide the new one in there. And we'll just press that new one on in there. New ball joint, new A-arm bushings. We can slap this back in here. We'll go ahead and tighten her up. Now we have some new bushings. No side-to-side play at all. So that one's good. You just got to pump her up with some grease. You got both sides greased up, kind of work it in a little bit. And then this thing is good to go. Now a lot of the front end parts on this thing were worn. Same goes for the tie rod end. A little bit of play in there, so we're gonna go ahead and replace that. Spin that old one off. New one can go on. And we'll leave these loose because we're gonna have to do a alignment afterwards. Tap the CV in next. Before I do that, I usually put a little bit of grease on this pin. So next time they pull it out, whoever does it, me or anybody else, it should come out a lot better. These things see a lot of water and mud and dirt, and usually these things will seize right up in there. In we go. Straighten it out. And then, nice. Go ahead and put our bearing knuckle assembly on here. The upper ball joint was nice and tight on this. The lower one was shot though. Now install the hub. Beautiful. Well, we're getting closer. I gotta jack this up a little bit. Alright. These on. And we still gotta torque down our hub nut here. Lower the jack down a little bit. There. Well, we're getting there now. We just gotta do the other side. I won't make you guys watch that, but I'll go ahead and finish that up, and then we'll give her a test run. Well, she's back on all four wheels, ready to take it on out of here, see how she does. Now, of course, it didn't go without troubles. They sent me some wrong parts with aftermarket parts on this thing, and the brake pads they sent me, they were supposed to fit an 800 XP. That's what I had written down. That's what their list says. I don't know if they sent me the wrong ones or what, but these ones look like the ATV Polaris brake pads, which would be the same as, say, the Ranger 800 midsize or the 500, 400. Any of the midsize use those smaller brake pads. These full-size XPs use larger brake pads. So that was wrong, so this didn't get new brake pads right now. This guy probably wants his machine back, so I'll get them ordered. And there was a few other things, some bushings that didn't fit. Let's go try out the full drive. Before I fire this up, this thing hasn't been running for quite a little while now, so I'm wondering if it's going to end up smoking bad. Well, go ahead and start it up. I'll pull the seat and you can see what it was doing before. Just remove that. I don't really know where it came from. I had the seat on, I was driving it. Last time I started this thing up, not the last time, but there was a time when it sat a little while and I went to fire it up and there was smoke billowing out underneath this. By the time I opened it all up, it was all cleared out. So we'll see if it does it now. Foot on the brake. Not really seeing anything right now. I'm guessing the valve cover was leaking, dripping oil down on the exhaust, but I don't know. I don't see anything right now. All right, let's go try out this full drive. I'm really hoping this thing's gonna work good. Like I said, I never used one. I imagine it'll work fine to begin with anyways. But boy, these aftermarket parts, they're just making me wonder if I should just keep going OEM. I hate the price. A lot of customers don't like the price of the OEM parts, but I don't know. If aftermarket keeps sending the wrong ones, it takes longer, which I usually don't charge for. So I'm usually the one that hurts out of the deal anyways. All right, let's try her out. Might as well slap this in all-wheel drive right now. No noises so far, that's a plus. Back in two. we'll take her right down to the sand pit where we did last time and try her out, try that full drive out. Alright, low range. Try it the same way. We'll do it in two-wheel drive first. This thing actually climbs pretty good in two-wheel, but you can see the rear tires spinning, front are not. All-wheel drive. Let it kick in. There we go. Now we can climb right over this bank until we get belly hung. Right in reverse. Why do I do this? I should have known better. Well, it took me a whole lot of digging by hand and using some sticks and stuff. And I shoved a couple of rocks under the back of the front wheels, and you can see she popped out a little bit. So she'll go now. Oh, yes. Full drive is definitely working. There's just some places you shouldn't go. This thing's got a winch, but there's really nothing there to hook onto. Even those little trees way up on the bank, they would have just come falling over anyways, probably. So, anyways, let's get this back to the house. Put her back in two-wheel. Kicks out, kicks in good. Yeah, seems to kick in out of full drive good. I am smelling some engine oil, so I'm guessing there's still a leak here. I didn't see a big pile of smoke this time, but I'll go ahead and reseal that valve cover. Because I did that rear transaxle, I don't know, a year or two ago, I'm guessing he probably never changed the fluid, so I'm gonna drop the fluid, refill that, and then do a couple little things. Probably change the engine oil and the filter while we're at it, and then this thing will be good to go, other than the brakes. And yeah, we'll see if he wants to do that at a later time. But hope you guys enjoyed the video. I'll catch you on the next repair.